Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Tyranny. I got a crazy story for you. I'm smiling, but it's not a happy one. This is about a woman who was basically given forced medical treatment, a forced C-section medical treatment against her will. I'm going to article from ProPublica.org. Apparently, they did this originally. She was in labor at a Florida hospital. Then she was in Zoom court for refusing a C-section. Yeah, I should have started with that, right? It's a pregnant woman that was in court on Zoom, as you can see here, being taken to court and having a court mandate that she was going to have to be given a C-section against her consent medical advice. Usually we live in a world where you're not supposed to get forced medical treatments, but this is one of those exceptions. So, I'm gonna take you on this article. Maybe we won't read every single word. I got a lot written down that I want to get through and talk about, but I kind of just want to read it and tell you how I feel about this. So I may be repeating myself as it goes on, but I think it's worth repeating because this is there are a lot of fundamental things we're going to talk about it in this episode. This is crucially important because of how fundamental it is. It's birth, right? So a lot of things are going to come together. It's a show that will encompass everything and some unexpected things, maybe. So her name is Charisse Doyley, okay? Black woman, mother of three, pregnant mother of three who found herself facing a judge while in labor at the University of Florida Health Hospital in downtown Jacksonville. So it's Florida. Florida, very conservative government, right? Has changed in the last several years. Then they they go through her story. She arrived at the facility with a plan for her birth. She wanted to try for a vaginal delivery, but understood from her years of experience as a professional birthing doula that things don't always go as planned. So already very important information is that this woman who was given the forced medical treatment, she's not new to the party. She's a doula, which means what? For those that don't know, I'm gonna have to catch us up on a lot of terminology that obviously I wasn't familiar with. So a doula is not a doctor, but it's something like, if I had to describe it in my own words, it's like a therapist. It's like an emotional support person for a mom giving birth. And you can see in this article or this study I'm showing you here is when you look at the outcomes when you have a doula, which is this person, this woman who's supporting you at the process of giving birth and before and after, you see there the C-section rate out of the study that they had 700 people, it basically drops in half. So you're 2 to 1 times more likely to not need a C-section if you have someone supporting you. It's a crazy thing if you really think about it, because all this doula can basically do is be there for you, talk to you, take you through it. So it's not biological, it's not chemical, it's not any medication that she can give you, it's not anything like that medical. It's literally just a human being, the human element for a mom. And I stress that because we're going to talk about vulnerability. We're going to talk about the most fundamental and I guess primordial about human beings. This is really about a deep dive into humanity and life and family. This is one of those episodes, and she's one of these women who's seen it all, and she helps these women to give birth. So she had 3 previous C-sections. Okay, all 3 of her children were by C-section, but she wanted to have a normal birth, a vaginal birth. Now, you may, for those that have experienced it that are not new to the party, that that's called a VBAC, and as I'm showing you here, there's a risk with that, right? That generally there's, I won't say stigma, I won't say frowned upon, but it's basically like a lot of people won't touch that because it's thought of as being more risky, because it is more risky, because you think about it, you got a bunch of scar tissue, right? You got former cutting in that region, and it's healed, it's sutured, and then you're gonna have a whole baby go through that area, right? But the percentage of that is 1%, right? As you can see here. So the overall risk is 1 to 2%. So she knew the risks. This woman knew the risks, and this is why she wanted to have a normal birth. Seems, pretty normal. But we'll talk about what happened. She arrived overnight at the hospital after her water broke. Doctors told her that they were concerned about the risk of uterine rupture, a potentially deadly complication for her and her baby. She understood the risk to be less than 2%, which we just talked about, and repeatedly told doctors she wouldn't consent to a cesarean without trying to have a vaginal delivery first. The doctors appeared to relent, leaving her to labor for several more hours. Then a nursing supervisor wheeled a tablet up to her bed and informed her that she was in court, the reason failing to agree to a C-section. When advocates for pregnant women say that you shouldn't lose your constitutional rights just because you conceived, this is the kind of situation they're talking about. Now, then the reporter says, I'm a reporter based on Alabama. Throughout my career, I focus on women facing the consequences of the state's fetal personhood policy. That's the idea the fetuses should have the same legal status as children. My investigation shows how a similar theory played in the cases of two women, Charisse Doyley and Brianna Bennett, who experienced eerily similar situations in Florida, both in Florida. In both cases, they found themselves to be fighting for their rights to make medical decisions because they were pregnant. I don't know how early they mention it, but they are both black women. They're both black women that are in Florida, which is very conservative. It's very pro-life right now. So that aspect is very clear here, even though maybe so far in the article it doesn't look like it is. But I'm going to go right into it because this is the elephant in the room. And it's not really that it's an elephant in the room. They talk about it in the article. But I want to talk about it. We're going to talk about a lot of controversial things. But this angle right here, not just white people, a bunch of white people, which she says herself, she actually asks for. Maybe I should show you that first before I talk about it. This is the judge explaining the proceedings, right? I'm going to play this and turn myself down. I learned how to use my knobs on my microphone.
My name is Michael Khalil. I'm a circuit court judge here in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm here in Duval County. The state of Florida has filed a petition for declaratory judgment. It's an emergency petition that they have filed. There's a number of people that you see. You may be able to see them on screen. We're on Zoom right now. And just so you know, this is being recorded. There's not a court reporter here, but it is being recorded for the record, and that'll be made available if any transcript is necessary and for any other proceedings as well. We are here, though, on this emergency petition where the state has, and I'm going to kind of summarize it very briefly. I'll have the state be able to explain specifically what they're requesting, but in short order, they're requesting that I declare, and I have not heard any evidence or testimony yet, but they're based upon the medical situation that's alleged in their petition. They're asking for an emergency C-section be granted by the court. In just a few moments, I'm going to give the state an opportunity of presenting any evidence or testimony that they may like to present. In addition, I'll hear from you as well as present any cross-examination, I suppose, if you wanted to ask any questions of the doctors. I see that you have your phone out as well. Just so you know, in terms of the recording of this, we do have this via Zoom. That'll be made available to you as well. If there was any transcript necessary, but I don't want you to become distracted.
Yeah, because I want to make sure that I record this because I have not had a chance to be able to consult with my own legal representation, and I'm trying to understand how you are taking my rights away as a patient to be able to decide my own care to give me an emergency C-section against my will.
Okay, that's not the one that I thought I was going to play, but it actually introduces it very well. You see what happened in the first video is crazy. Just walks in, this woman, like she's basically laying there naked on the bed, and all of a sudden they just zoom in on her, and boom, you're in court all of a sudden. When you're in this position, this vulnerable of a position, that is just crazy. It's crazy, and I think you see the just like the drastic nature of it. Well, I want you to hear some more. I really want this part of it.
And I came here out of precaution. However, I still have rights as an American citizen and as a patient, that I am allowed to decide what goes on with me and my body and my baby.
Well, let me ask you about that. What about the risks to the child? The doctors testified about some risks, and help me understand that.
In regards to what? Because she's saying that the uterine rupture can cause the placenta to abrupt, and it's a lot of what ifs and maybes. Anytime you go into childbirth, whether you do a vaginal or a C-section, there's inherent risk to the mother and the baby. So if it's between them choosing whether I have to live or the baby has to live, I did tell them that I want to live. I have other children out here in the world that need me. And that is my right, because at the end of the day, if I die from a C-section, nobody on this call is going to take care of my children. And that's just being frank. Okay, so I am concerned about the well-being of my child, but at the end of the day, with my background, I can read a trace just like they can. And there's nothing that is saying that this is an emergency situation that I have to be rushed into a C-section within an hour.
Okay, again, not the one that I wanted to play, but we're gonna roll with it. So she basically asserts her individuality. I love that what she says is that, yeah, the baby's the most important, but she has 3 other children. Like, she has to take care of her children. None of those other people are gonna take care of her children for her. And she is just, again, asserting her rights as a patient. And you could see she's not new to the party. She knows what's going on. She can read a trace like they can, whatever that means. But she's not falling for the okie doke in this one. And I might as well just go into this, what I wanted to go into, which is the Florida government and versus so it's the pro-abortion and the and the anti-abortion angle, the partisanship, so to speak. I want to dive into this because over the years I've become familiar with these archetypes. And based on the episode, I go against these or I go against these, right? The type of thinking, I've gotten familiar with the characters. Let me switch over so you could see me, I guess, if you want to. There's this type of thinking that the person has who is anti-abortion. They elevate the child in the womb above the mother, okay? You could almost see the father, the religious patriarch there saying, you're not carrying your child, it's not my body, my choice, you're carrying my child. It's the idea of the woman just as a, just as a carrier, right? But then I know the types that are pro-abortion, and there are definitely more people that are pro-abortion today. That's definitely the dominant trend, In Florida, you see a swing in the other direction in the last few years. You kind of see this. You see it kind of with Donald Trump in the past, I don't know, you could say 10 years, right? 12 years. It says there's kind of been a conservative backlash, but for the longest, it's been in the direction of more abortion, right? Now, the people that are pro-abortion, for me, their argument is easy to win. In my opinion, I think that it's an easy argument. The argument is, this being that is inside of me, as a pregnant mom, cannot survive without me. I and only I am responsible for this being. This being is part of me. It actually doesn't exist without me. It does not exist outside of me until I give birth. So therefore, you cannot force me to do what you want to do with this being, right? So you cannot stop me from doing anything to my body as long as my body and this being are entangled and I'm nourishing this body fully. That's a cut and dry argument to me. And it's not it's not an argument about life when life starts. It's not about that. I see the killing of a fetus the same as the killing of an adult. At the end of the day, I don't want to see it. I don't want any of it to happen. I don't. So, am I anti-abortion? Of course I'm anti-abortion. I don't want any dead children. It's fucking simple. But I fight for the right to protect. I protect the right, reserve the right to kill. Sometimes you need the right to kill, okay? Especially with adults. But when you talk about a mom, at the end of the day, what I'm really against is the government doing or anybody doing anything by force, whether it's in one direction or the other, whether it's forcing her to abort her child, like during eugenics that happened, or forcing her to, to have the child a certain way and not be able to have an abortion. I don't want that done by force. Okay, I think that's an easy argument. Period. You gotta have the right to kill. You just have to have it for things to work properly. Period. Now the circumstances and the context of that is a separate conversation. I'm not trying to go into that. But then you get these modern pro-abortion women, and their beta male, white knight cucklord, soy boy followers, all these men that, are all about pro-choice. Sorry to promote stereotypes and call people out, but it's so prevalent, and it has been so prevalent. See, they get the idea of the autonomy of the woman in this case. They realize that the woman calls the shots in this. She's the one carrying the baby. You gotta believe her on what she says, okay? But when you look at what else they support, the government regulation of the free market, all the LGBTQ stuff, all the trans stuff, progress of people of color, gun control, financial control, basically control of everything. Basically everything that hurts men. And white men specifically. And it seems like men of color are being elevated by this leftist progressive wave to kind of tear down the status quo. But they're really not. Men of color are really not benefiting in this society. They've very quickly become the enemy already. See, white men are the enemy only because they happen to be demographically, statistically, the high performers in society. That's it. They end up having the money. They end up having the freedom to buy things, to own property, okay, to not have to work sunrise to sundown and not have any time to do nothing, just have time for the cigarette and the beer, okay? That's why white men are the enemy. I'm not saying that's their identity. I'm not saying white men are inherently successful, like social Darwinism. I'm saying that's their position. Their position in society has been they're the high performers, okay? They're the generators of energy. But if these white men are cut down from their position in society, which they are, but you will see very quickly that the Asian man, the black man, the Hispanic man, whoever takes their spot, is going to become the new villain. That's the type of trend that you have in leftism and progressivism. And to sum it all up with this thing, the other side, the pro-abortion side, is anti-man. They're saying, instead of the man saying, you're carrying my child, not yours, this is the woman saying, I'm carrying my child, and you as the man are only a sperm donor. I don't have to share this being with you. I don't have to share this child with you that you helped create. And once I bring this child that you helped create into the world, you, the man, are going to have to support us, and you owe me. You owe us the nourishment, the support, but I don't owe you anything. Now, these two sides that I just talked about, do you see how both wings of this mentality are full of spite and enmity? They're just enemies. Their arguments are only logical as far as in their utility to justify their underlying metaphysical hatred for the counterpart. It's like an endless fight. It's like, how often do you see this in custody battles? Just the saddest, just heartbreaking stuff. Just to stab the other person in the heart and twist it. I'm blending two things. I'm blending like family dynamics and then left and right wing politics on a social level. But I'm blending them because I see them as analogies. I do a lot of analogies in this episode, okay? So, just like dumb men and dumb women that have, hurt each other and separated, just like dumb men and women, they're going to argue forever and resolve nothing. That's what politics is. Argue forever, resolve nothing. No progress. So, yes, in the birth setting, here we're going to go back to the story. The injustice in the birth setting is the world is against the mom, for sure. And the men who are sitting there, they don't fight hard enough for the women in this. They don't know enough. They don't have enough balls. They don't have enough of a voice to stand up for the women in this scenario. So the woman ends up having to go to the fucking hospital. They take care of the whole birth thing because men don't know anything about birth, so they're scared to say anything about it. They can't be scared. Scared money don't make money, right? But then after the divorce, right, we talk about custody battles and all of that, then the world is against the men. And when it comes to these situations, the women don't fight hard enough for their counterparts there. Women will say, get your money, girl, and that's it. They generally, obviously I'm generalizing. So to sum this all up, and I'm going to backtrack just a bit, it's like, if you want to give birth, the medical system says no problem as long as we get to do it, right? If you want an abortion, no problem as long as we get to do it. See, the same people that would carry out a procedure that would 100% result in the death of the child, they now take a woman to court in the hospital bed, a pregnant woman in the hospital bed. The hospital insists on it because they want to do the procedure by force against her will because of a 2% chance, or even if it was 10% or 50% chance. But they would do a 100% chance abortion as long as they get to do it their way. So as we keep talking about this, just keep in mind this is about another entity other than the mom telling the parents what's in the best interest of the fetus, the best interest of the child. And you see, even the judge said that, this is about the health of your baby. And that is just, that phrase is kind of their best interest. And I would say best interest according to who? It's part of a greater issue in society that people who are not involved, uninvolved people in parenting, think they're more qualified than the parent to evaluate the interest of a child. That's a thing I'll go back to. But I really want to hear her play the race card because I thought it was a well-played race card. This is the beginning. I might as well show you this. I'm going to turn myself down.
It's a real judge,
Yes. I wasn't being hyperbolic. It's a real judge.
Let me get this is the craziest thing I ever seen.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I know you may be able to see me on your screen in just a second here. I'll introduce myself. I do see you on. Can you hear me okay, ma'am?
Oh,
Yes, sir, I can hear you perfectly fine.
That's just crazy how it just zooms in, Let's see what ended up happening. We might as well just go through the rest of these videos.
I do not plan on transferring
Oh, you do?
moment, but I do not want anybody that's involved in this case to perform any type of medical procedures on me.
Well, you have a new doctor
Yes.
coming on. I don't know.
Yeah, no, they don't have nobody African American that they can give me.
Let me ask you. I don't know that. Then I don't find that race really has much to do with this, ma'am.
Tough when the people that play the race card, the judges, the system, the corporate world, and they get it spoken back to them, and he's trying to be politically correct. Anyway, not too much against the judge. I don't find him to be the worst, but the whole thing is terrible.
It does have much to do with it because historically, Black people do better when they have healthcare providers that look like them. So even though you don't think so, statistically speaking, I have a better chance of having better care from a BIPOC person. There's nobody Black in here.
Good point.
Okay.
And they know it's true too. I'm so tired of this. I'm over this whole situation. Like, y'all are gonna make me have level 3 tracing. How bad y'all stressing me out?
One second, ma'am, because what I'm trying to understand is then I've heard a lot of evidence and testimony today, and please understand, Ms. Doyley, I'm not ordering that they perform a C-section on you right now. You understand that, right? Do you understand that?
Yeah, as long as I meet this and do that. So what is happening if 6 o'clock comes and nothing is still wrong with the baby? They're gonna tie me up and go give me a C-section against my will?
In this vulnerable, disadvantaged position, she had no preparation, right? She doesn't do this professionally, argue in court. She's handling herself great, that one. she correctly identifies the chain of events. He's saying, "Oh, we're not saying you're gonna go right now," but then she ended up, of course, having the C-section. That did happen, and she correctly identified what was going on there. They didn't just hold court as a precaution. They were going to do this, and this happens to moms again and again. There's a certain way that things are done, and you don't get to have your own baby your way. They have a way that they do it, and they're going to strong arm you through it. And I loved her calling out the racial statistics, and this part it's only natural. If you look at the effects of the doula, right, just having the doula can have positive outcomes just by having a person there. Then obviously having a person that gives you familial feelings, that makes you feel comfortable, that looks like you. That. And she's right. They're y'all stressing me out. I mean, think about this. You're seeing all these people in suits, and you're surrounded basically by like 10 people completely foreign to you that are just treating you like an article, like an object. And a lot of times people play the race card, and it's just bullshit. But this was the right time to play the race card, and it actually is a super interesting thing because of how bad the outcomes are for black women, especially when it comes to these complications with birth, right? But I was just watching a video earlier today that was about these high toxic dump sites, like chemical runoff, toxic waste, sometimes radioactive stuff, mostly like lead and forever chemicals. And statistically, they're dumped in black areas, in minority areas, especially black communities. And they call them sacrifice areas, and people do get sick, and they just do. Like that's a real thing that is happening in society. Now, the judge is saying, I don't think race has a lot to do with it. And objectively, when it comes to the letter of the law, no, not directly. It doesn't have a lot to do with it. But it does. These things, it's not so much race, but people are making an overall judgment of you. And this is my sticking point. This is why I'm focusing on the race thing, because this ultimately has to do with the fact that these people in court, the hospital is basically forcing, the hospital wants to do this. The court is only a means to make sure that they can do it legally and not get sued. It's other people who are making a judgment of you, of who you are as a mom, if you're smart enough, if you deserve to have your own child your way, if you deserve to make decisions regarding your health. Are you smart enough to make these decisions? Do you have the right, to be involved and informed when it comes to the treatments and the medications that you receive? So race clearly comes into play, because this woman knew what she was talking about. She was informed. She had knowledge. Didn't seem like she was belligerent or anything, and they force her to do it, right? So again, although there's a modern, fashionable pro-black crowd, and then the pro-black crowd kills me. Like, I've heard all this, that white men have all the privilege, and meanwhile, it's everybody other than white men who get their school paid for, and they get the free jobs, despite being incompetent and unqualified for the jobs. And sometimes a guy that is darker skinned will get the social benefit of the doubt. In my city, at least, right, in Chicago, I know in other parts of the country it's probably the opposite, and you have more racism the other way. So either way, it's bad. But where I live, I could see people that are like, I wouldn't give them the benefit of the doubt, but they get the benefit of the doubt. And me, because I work construction and I look like it's like a girl's gonna walk by me and grab her purse or something, or like look the other way because this is probably a guy that's gonna catcall me or something, shit like that. But anyway, people act like American white men are the ones that are dependent on the mental and financial productivity of the minorities, and it's delusional. It's not consistent with reality. But I'm really only saying that to play devil's advocate a little bit, because I'm definitely, my heart is definitely more on the side of minorities. It always has been. I kind of have like my roots uh, in what drives me to fight injustice. It like is more left wing. It was more, like when I was a teenager, I thought Che Guevara was pretty cool. I thought, oh, it's just the companies, it's just the corporations are, have invaded all these countries, and colonialism is keeping people enslaved. So I'm approaching it from that angle. I haven't really changed metaphysically, but I've just seen different, seen it develop differently. But racism is real, and Charisse, she stood her ground on it. To me, it's no coincidence. It was just very easy for people to look at her and say, you don't deserve rights. And in this extreme case where they had the C-section against her will, it happened to a black woman. But this happens to women from all races, from all walks of life. They're treated this way. It just doesn't end up being as blatant. And when somebody looks at you and says you don't deserve rights, that's a claim of slavery. That's a fundamental claim of slavery. And a lot of people pull the race card. Sometimes it's bullshit. Sometimes it is absolutely true. I'm just calling it like it is. I'm not tied to any group. Remember, white man is my position in society. It's not my identity. My identity is I'm an autonomous, independent being with a lot of fucking testosterone, some talent. I fight for what's right as a son and hopefully, potential future father. That's my identity. And I judge people too. I try to judge them based on their identity and not their position in society, right? But there are other kinds of prejudice here, and I'll just show it to you, right? Because again, I'm kind of gonna play both sides here to give you the full story. I'm not saying that the nurses there and people at the hospital are evil, or that they wanted to ruin her experience. That they're thinking this. They're thinking time matters. This is a study about labor duration and the risk of uterine rupture. So, not only did she have 3 sections already, which increases the risk that you're going to have uterine rupture, but also when you have a long labor, and they have this study here that, this will increase. You're thinking about independent factors that are both increasing the risk of a bad outcome. But although in this you say that the highest risk for uterine rupture was at 6 hours, and this wasn't that. It was even longer for her, right? Although I don't know if she was in labor the whole time. I don't know how you define that, right? But there is a time aspect here in defense of the hospital staff. I guess this is a good time to just mention that in the United States, it is basically just a travesty of bad childbirth outcomes compared to other countries. Like, moms die in the United States giving birth to their children, and way more than you would expect. And there are 2 articles here that I'm just going to go through, where they compare the international and U.S. state rates of maternal mortality. So this is when the mom dies during childbirth. This is the kind of stuff that they're concerned about, right? So maybe, these nurses and the doctors are right to worry about a bad outcome in childbirth. But my point is, why are we having such bad outcomes here when we're supposed to be richer? We're supposed to have good health care here in the United States. But of course, childbirth only happens one way in the Western society and in the United States, and in the United States especially. It's the Western medical way. It's, inducing birth. Almost a quarter of pregnancies are C-sections. Strong arm the woman, get it done, get the baby out, and let's go. And when my friend told me this, that a while ago, the United States was like the worst of all developed countries when it comes to maternal mortality or the neonatal mortality. As a joke, I'm thinking like, oh yeah, they'll be right in between Botswana and Sierra Leone, these third world African countries. And I thought it was a joke, but when you look at where the U.S. is here, I'm hovering over the chart. I see Palestine, Wisconsin, Palestine, United States in general, Chile, Oman. These countries that they, definitely have issues. They're not developed countries. They're not here where the European countries are. Israel, Switzerland, Norway, Malta. They're way down there. And the United States, all these yellow dots are different U.S. states, right? So the worst is. Oh, interesting. It's we go right into our next point. This dot that is the worst, that has the worst mortality rate, is just the general black population in the United States. So black women have the worst outcomes. It's very interesting, and I'm not going to try to speculate why too much, but I guess I am, since I was already talking about some of the different factors. So one of the factors that was working against Miss Charisse was that she was doing this for a long time, right? There's a time element, there's a prior C-section element, there's the scar tissue, and then also she's a big woman. So obesity and being overweight has really bad outcomes as well, which you would expect that, right? It's just harder to, a lot of people don't touch on this, but it's not anything personal or disrespectful. It's just when you're carrying more of that mass, your heart is working harder, your blood vessels are working harder. It's just not optimal. It's just going to be harder. It's not that you can't give birth to a healthy baby, but you take everything into account, and you do have bad things happen. So black women are up against it. You see this here with this chart, but here's another thing, right back to what she was saying, is that you look at what the hospital is treating them like. So if having the doula there can affect childbirth outcomes so much that these people can have a C-section. Now this is another thing. Okay, another thing to consider. It is way more dangerous to have a C-section than to have a normal birth, because when you look at the maternal death rate, it's 3.6 times more likely to die within a span of a few months if you have a C-section, statistically, right? So you think about how black women are treated in hospitals and take all these factors into account, and you could kind of see what I'm pointing to, which is that the general childbirth medical hospital industry is viewing people a certain way. And I'm getting there. It's already been 37 minutes, but we're gonna get way deeper into that, but maybe I'm gonna leave that, especially that race aspect there, because I could go into some things, and it's an interesting thing for me to research, but I'm not gonna try to present that just now. I'll just mention this. I was reading before, exploring racial differences in the obesity gender gap. So in general, women just tend to be more overweight than men, which just makes sense, right? It's easier it's easier to eat less and exercise more when you have to do physical labor for many hours out of the day. So no wonder men are in better shape. They have to be, right? Now, of course, as a mom, also you nourish the child, so you're experiencing fluctuations in your own body composition. You produce the milk, you have all of this stuff. So, part of this is just that's the way it is, and part of this is, to me, I think, I really think there's big time injustice done to the black community. And you look at the toxic waste that they're dumping. I don't have it here as proof, but you can look it up. Just that history. It's not even about things like the Tuskegee experiment, but just in general, you take a look at what percentage of the community is on welfare and what kind of stuff that can give you, and the way the whole system is slanted, that you just look at it statistically. It's not that easy to have a healthy childbirth to begin with, right? Let alone if you're in a hostile environment, if I could say that, Okay, so let me shift from that. Now I want to talk about the right to receive care. Is there such a thing, like the right to health care, Because ultimately this is what it comes down to, right? Yeah, they forced her to give birth, to have a C-section. But it's not like they held her down from walking out of that court case, right? Or maybe during the court case is a bad example, but technically they didn't force her the way you would, force somebody if you kidnap them. Technically they didn't. But of course, I think we all see the injustice there. They basically did force her. But I have a strong fundamental conviction that I hold, that you can't tell somebody how to give you service, right? You can't force those nurses either to give you the kind of care that you want. Of course, they have doctors have an oath. They have different standards that they follow. But just the way that I see things, and referencing natural law, I think you can hold people to a standard of integrity, in the sense that if somebody claims to offer a surgery, they claim that they offer say an ACL surgery, right? That they're going to use the same standard tools, they're going to do this according to the contract, they're going to give you the same quality of care, the same sanitation standards. I think you can require that, right? But I don't think that a business should be punished just because they served your food in a way that you didn't like, right? It's basically the idea of, everybody has rights. You have rights as a patient, but we do things a certain way at the hospital, and we never force you to go to the hospital. I do think that's a mature, independent way to live. Like, that's my outlook on life. It's not even like a political or philosophical view even. I think that's just what it means to be a fully grown human. But here's why I mention this. We have an issue because there is no free market choice for equivalent medical care. And to me, this is the crux of the whole story. That you don't actually have an equal alternative to get that kind of care. You cannot perform a C-section if you're not licensed and regulated. You can have a midwife, deliver your baby, but even a midwife, someone who helps a mom through the birth process, right? That's illegal in 37 out of the 50 states unless they are certified. And you might say, all it is that they get certified, so what? It sounds reasonable, but what does certified really mean in this context? In the Western medicine childbirth practices, if they tell you to attend, and they do tell you to attend 75 prenatal exams, 20 births or 100 births, whatever it is, what kind of births and exams do you think they're learning? They're watching the Western medical way. So, that's the only way we do things. It's the choices are, either you go to the hospital and do it the way that it is done, so they induce the birth with Pitocin when they determine it necessary. They'll do the C-section when they determine it's necessary. Antibiotics, vaccines, all of that stuff, that's the way they do it. You don't really have the choice, and if you think you do, just ask the women who have tried to basically advocate for themselves, and they ended up doing it the way the hospital does it. That's just how it happened, Maybe they weren't tied down with straps and belts, but that's what happened. So you look at the outcomes. When you say alternative, doing it at home is not an alternative. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah, anybody can. Yeah, you could do it at home technically, but my point is, it's illegal to compete with the companies that have a monopoly on food, water, and medicine. This is the key to me, because technically, at no point are you tied to the bed. But people think this in their mind whether they say it or not. They're thinking, you went to the hospital. They didn't come to your house. You went to the hospital and asked them to take care of you, right? So you don't get to tell them how to serve you. That's kind of how I started this, and that's how people think of it. Now, of course, I'm on the side of the patient here, but I'm setting this up where it's the same thing where when you criticize the government, like me. People say, well, you can always go somewhere else if you don't like America. No, you can't. No, you cannot. That is not a legitimate alternative. That's a false alternative. The alternative would be, if I could stay right here, continue to live where I'm living, and I have the option now to be out of the American jurisdiction. I'm still staying, keeping all my property, keeping my life, and now I'm doing business with another entity who also has coverage or jurisdiction over my area. right? They have their own, whatever you want to say, police, their own laws, their own water department, their own food department. That would be an alternative. Of course, that doesn't happen. You can't do it. If you want to be free from a certain government, what you have to do is give up all of your property. I'd have to give up my house. I'd have to give up all of the holdings and assets that I have here. They're going to take it. And even then, when you give up all your property, they still have to let you leave. Like if you're swimming across the border from Texas to Mexico on the Rio Grande, and someone claims that you still owe the U.S. government a debt, they can arrest you swimming across the river and bring you back until they say that you're free of the debts and they can let you go. That's called slavery. That's slavery, and it's the same thing with medicine. You cannot get comparable childbirth care. What if you need something? Well, what if you need some kind of medication? It's just like tools, right? You should be able to buy a certain kind of a drill, right? Or a water filtration system the way we can. But when it comes to medicine, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, they're withheld. It's a monopoly. You cannot do it unless you're dealing with the hospital, which is a certain way of doing things. They only do things one way. So ultimately, this is about resources and it's about economics. And what happens globally with the monopoly they got on food, on water, on medicine, it's all racketeering. It's seriously racketeering globally, but especially in the U.S. We're trending towards more C-sections, less patient autonomy, more forced treatments, less informed consent, and more assembly line ways, robotic treatment of human beings, especially when it comes to their survival requirements, the bare survival, food, water, health, bare survival. And there's racketeering. So who are the racketeers, right? Who's doing the racketeering? Insurance companies, medical employees, lawyers, judges, and lawmakers. These are all professions, not every single one of them, but in these professions are these people that take part in the racket. So insurance companies, they want you to have the C-sections. It makes more money. Everybody makes more money, okay? They're making money off of the taxpayers by doing this kind of stuff. I'm going to take you back to my monitor here. This thing that I learned about called defensive medicine. Is the rising rate of cesarean sections a result of more defensive medicine? To cut a long story short, defensive medicine is what basically they're calling not the right care for the best outcome, but just the right medical treatment to not get sued. So when it comes to, again, insurance companies and courts, this is what defensive medicine is. So I'm just going to read the first article because I think he talks about it pretty well. Benjamin Sachs, MD. In the United States today, almost 1 in 4 infants is delivered by cesarean section. The marked rise in the rate of the use of this procedure over the last decade has coincided with a changing medical legal environment. In this chapter, I address the question of whether there is a relationship between the medical legal climate and the rising rate of C-sections. To address this difficult question, I reviewed the epidemiology of cesarean sections, discussed the causes for the rise of the rate, and examined the possible relationship of that rise to the practice of defensive medicine. So there's a history. There's a lot of interesting stuff. And there are very strong conclusions. Look at this summary. There's overwhelming evidence that part of the recent rise in C-section rate in this country is the result of the medical legal environment. This is what I just talked about, right? About this racketeering. Given the current siege mentality among clinicians. So he's saying they have a siege mentality. That's almost as strong language as mine. Racketeering. Given the current siege mentality among clinicians, one wonders why the cesarean section rate is not higher. So it makes me want to look this guy up and see how he's been treated by his contemporaries, right? Because he's definitely speaking out. There's a guy who's pissed off. Arguments that the rise in C-section rate is a result of defensive medicine include, and there are all these things that he includes, and also arguments to the other arguments in the other direction, as I try to do as well, right? We play devil's advocate. But of course, when you talk about a natural birth, when you talk about having a doula, the insurance is not going to cover that. So that's why you don't have them happening. It's like they want you to be alone, and that is what happens with the criminal enterprise, with racketeering. It's like you want someone to be outnumbered. When you want to rob someone, you want them to be alone, and you want them to be vulnerable. And that's what happens to moms when they give birth. It just happens to be that way, right? This is another article you're looking at. I shouldn't say article. This is a scientific paper, right? It's a letter. Defensive medicine, a bane to healthcare. He quotes the Hippocratic Oath: I will prescribe regimen for the good of my patients according to my ability and my judgments, and never do harm to anyone. That's the Hippocratic Oath. The above oath is what every physician is bound to follow, but what happens in real practice is quite alarming. The so-called divine profession has lost its glory due to the intrusion of an evil, namely defensive medicine. Defensive medicine, in simple words, is departing from normal medical practice as a safeguard from litigation. So, for me, defensive medicine is not the main enemy. It's not the general, the ultimate problem, but it's just another way, another really evil symptom that proves the racketeering, the problem that we're up against. So, Miss Charisse, I clicked on something in OBS. Hope I didn't cut myself off. Oh, we're still recording. Happy about that. So, I'm going to take you back to me, and I want to talk about the metaphysical things, okay? The real deep things that I want to talk about when it comes to birth. Charisse ended up being successful, if you can say successful. She, as far as I know, her baby is okay, and her story came out. We'll see what happens moving forward. Wishing her the best. With this situation of how they treated her and how they treat mothers in general, and the way they treat mothers when you're about to give birth is you lose control of yourself. It's like on a day in, day out basis, you have total control and sovereignty over yourself, especially as a woman, but generally you don't have anybody, really putting their hands on you or forcing you to do things. Other than when you go into that hospital and you're getting close to giving birth, when you're at your most vulnerable. There's a certain way they do things, and like an assembly line, this is what happens. And there are giveaways of the worldview behind this. I want to talk about the psychology of like why we do things this way. It's generally the materialistic view, but a lot of scientists, definitely a lot of atheists, think this way. They think of the universe as a purposeless entropy machine where energy is going to dissipate and even out and just fade out in what is called heat death of the universe. That what they say is the Big Bang. It all dissipates, it flows until all of the energy burns out. There's entropy, there's an equilibrium, and the universe will basically be dead, and that will be the end of the universe. That is the general physics, like classic physical view of physics of just like what the universe is. And to me, that's the same view that the medical man, I'm laughing at these fucking women outside while I'm doing my show, but this is the thing, right? I'm not gonna tell them what to do. They give birth to the children ultimately, so sometimes you gotta just take it in stride, right? And wait for your chance, right? So the way the doctors and the medical profession looks at birth is basically they look at it as like a death that hasn't happened yet. This is the metaphysical of philosophical worry that seems to be behind the way that we deal with birth, especially in America and throughout the Western world. It's like a disaster waiting to happen. Okay, my friend used this phrase. It's like a disaster waiting to happen, and it's the same way that people look at human life, like that there's just no point to this. We're here now, but we're basically all heading towards death, and then we'll be gone, and there will be no more of us, right? That is the predominant view. That may not be your view, it's not my view, but scientifically that's the view, generally, right? So in the minds of most people, the mother is not a healing agent or an ordering agent. She's only viewed as an agent of potential fuck-ups. And this I don't blame men only for that, but you gotta blame men for that a bit. It is a bit of a stereotype thing, I laugh because of my response to my neighbors, who are nice people. If they see this show, I don't mean anything. But I blame women for this too, is that they've accepted this view of women that they're just supposed to, do this, they're supposed to do their duty, and they just, they don't see themselves as having the power to heal and the power of, love and bringing people together, that it's just like bumbling through life, and the only things that women do are like to fuck things up or shake things up, There is some of that there. There's a connection there. It's a really interesting thing, the connection between basically the Newtonian view of the universe and the view of motherhood as secondary and like a carrier. Like we're just a carrier of life until we die, and then the life goes somewhere else. It's like our body was never even ours. I hope you're seeing that connection, Now, the other metaphysical statement that is being made here, which I've already said, it's a claim made to your body. This is proof that slavery exists in the world today. They think they own your child. They're claiming to own you and claiming to own your child. Like you have no sovereignty as a mother. You're about to bring the baby into the world. Nobody else can, but it's not yours somehow. And you see, they use the baby that you're carrying as a technicality, like a loophole to control you. Because it's about the health of the child now. It's not about your health anymore. It's about the health of the child. And as much as, everybody, including me, believes in that kind of sacrifice for the child, and that's the most important thing. But it's this kind of destruction of the self, like without the power of the woman, of the mom, none of this happens. And it's like the mom and the dad, think about him in this circumstance, So this Week in Tyranny is a show about injustice on earth and freedom. And this story about Cherise has just been another chapter. It's another chapter where an innocent woman was violated and had the birth of her child taken by force, irreversibly, they've taken this from her. This is a part that I get very deeply, even though, I don't have a personal connection to it. But this idea that this is like an amazing, magical experience that is just like no other, and it was taken from her when it wasn't a high percentage that something was going to go wrong. And you think about like these other nurses and doctors in the hospital, like because they were working a long shift, because they were tired. Like think about it, that the rest of her life, her relationship with this child and that family, for what? She had this done against her will for what? And do you see how this, like the implications of it, like it's not just that day, it's about how she's feeling to then, nurse the child and come up and raise her baby. And this is a great tragedy, honestly. It really pisses me off. But we can yell about it, we could cry, we could kill, we could forgive. No matter what we do, injustice is going to keep happening. To really do something requires fundamental change. Fundamental change. So this show was inspired by Mark Passio and his show, What on Earth is Happening? And it is about fundamental change at the moral and philosophical level, both individual and collective. It's about moral, fundamental change and changing our behavior. That's what on earth is happening. Now, my show This Week in Tyranny has carried that torch of metaphysical a moral and philosophical fundamental change. But I want to shift and pivot here. Like, we're talking about the same moral and philosophical fundamental change, but in a lens of physics and thermodynamics. I want to talk about this. It's basically my big picture of the universe. Okay, here comes Konrad Rogoz's unified field theory, which is our part of it. The big picture of the universe is this: everything is basically a field. It's a medium of potential, kind of like a womb, right? Like, we're all just living here, and it's infinite potential. That field can never be created or destroyed, right? That's thermodynamics. It's always going to be this field, and infinite things are possible. But basically, laws of physics and quantum physics, they describe the differences and the fluctuations and interactions inside of that infinite field of potential. So you have laws, you have natural law, but the field itself, the universe itself, life, it just kind of exists. It's just there. And basically, because this thing just exists, anything and everything is possible in the universe. Potentially, it's possible. And it's not holographic. It's not an illusion. It's not anything like that. It's just like a field that exists, and infinite things can happen. Now, whether or not something happens is just very simply a mathematical balance type of a thing. Where is the energy trending? What are the forces acting on it? What are the forces going this way or that way? Okay, this is the way that the universe goes. It's just about where energy goes. And if you want to control the universe, you want to control energy. And controlling energy comes down to the fundamental pillars: creation and destruction. Okay, basically birth and death. I'm going to stop my little monologue here and take you into something I was looking at, because it's part of this. Birth has to do a lot with this. This is the creation of energy. Oxytocin. When is oxytocin is the love hormone. Here it is, Harvard Health, oxytocin, the love hormone. So that is actually what induces childbirth, right? It's the feeling of love, this thing that actually causes the contractions. Now, if you go down here, medical use, we have synthetic oxytocin called pitocin that's administered, but it does not cross the blood-brain barrier, and therefore does not replicate the brain-based effects of naturally released oxytocin. So in other words, we got a medication that does the same thing as far as contractions and inducing birth, but it doesn't make you feel the love, because we can't do that, because the blood-brain barrier are like the gates of heaven. This is my theory, right? You take a look at what this looks like. This thing, these arches, okay? These are the gates of heaven in my view. You see this in the brain, and this is where you think about what the blood is. It's pumping blood constantly, this life force energy that's flowing. And also the brain, the electrical organ that's tied to your heart that basically makes the blood work. It's this interplay between these two forces, and then there's a barrier to make sure that your central nervous system doesn't have any pathogens or toxins flow into it. And this is God's territory, or the universe's territory. This is something that human beings just cannot really mimic. So that's why pitocin is not going to cross the blood-brain barrier, because it is not worthy to cross the gates of heaven, because that type of spiritual universal experience is reserved to women and their children and families. Look at these other circumstances where oxytocin is released. During breastfeeding, okay, so nurturing the actual child that you gave birth to. During sexual activity in both males and females, okay, so I'm seeing a connection here, okay? I'm seeing stuff with men and women, and the stuff that leads to having children and nourishing them, and all this stuff that produces the strongest love that we have in the universe. In social and emotional contexts, oxytocin is released during skin-to-skin contact, hugging, eye contact, and positive social interactions, contributing to feelings of trust, bonding, and reduced stress. Reduced stress is also associated with having a healthy weight and having just good health, healthy immune system and everything. So trust bonding, I'm seeing a big time connection. I'm seeing that like all of this stuff that leads to a healthy child, it seems like it's a lot of love, a lot of oxytocin based stuff. Not that this chemical is the holy grail, but it certainly is present at the same time that, you know, other things are present that together lead to good outcomes. So that seems to be creation. So that's why this birth thing is really important. Now back to what I was saying. If you want to control the universe, you want to control energy. And controlling energy comes down to the two fundamental pillars, creation and destruction, birth and death. So we're talking about birth, about creation, right? You know, this thing that brings the baby out into the world, and then later when, you know, to nourish the baby, and men and women having the kind of trust and bonds to create an environment, right? To create a family. It's this oxytocin thing, okay, that generates that bond. Now, in the universe, where does energy come from? Nuclear fusion. Of course, I'll get fact checked on this by ChatGPT, because energy is not created or destroyed, and that's the first law of thermodynamics, right? But when we talk about, so there's potential energy everywhere, right? As I said, there's a field and everything is possible. So there's potential energy everywhere. It doesn't just magically happen. But in nuclear fusion, it happens, and that's what happens in the sun. Okay, the sun that happens to power everything. And that's when you have hydrogen atoms, and with that high temperature and high pressure, they crash together and they form a bond. The protons, there's a new bond, and hydrogen turns into helium, and the strength of that bond releases mass and energy, and that's why the sun shines, because you have now a positively charged ion, and then you have free electrons. You have free ions and free electrons. So when we talk about two separate things that come together and they have a strong bond, and the strength of that bond frees a separate entity, it frees things up and creates energy, that's what childbirth is. That's what the family structure is. The family structure is the atomic structure. Like, not literally, but again, analogies. The same thing that we see happen on a cellular level, it is what we do on the human level, on the social level. This is how we are going to solve the social issues, the social problems in the world. We have to solve them at the individual level, and that means not only doing shadow work, but understanding how we work as people and learning to flow with and according to the laws of the universe, from cellular to moral and behavioral. So, do people come together? Like hydrogen atoms. They give a part of themselves up. These hydrogen atoms, they reduce both of themselves a minuscule amount. They're still mostly themselves, but they become something new. It does two things. It turns themselves, the two atoms, into a separate new atom, helium. Helium has totally different properties than hydrogen. And also, it releases free energy. That's what the man and woman does when they have a child. There's strength in the bond, and there's leftover energy that's free to become something else or interact with other structures. So that process is what powers the sun. That's what the sun is. It's a gigantic plasma ballast. Plasma, which is a super excited hot state of free ions and electrons. That's what powers the sun, and therefore what powers the earth, and everything else we know is that process, nuclear fusion. And that's what creates energy. So if you want to control that process, you control the universe. The family and the relationships between individuals create energy. Whether you mean atomic particles or human beings, that's what creates energy. So if you control courtship, sex, birth, nutrition, childcare, and education, you control the universe. Which is what has happened. People on Earth are doing this without any supernatural powers or supernatural assistance. The agents of injustice are human beings, and some of them are very consciously utilizing basic eternal mathematical processes. There's a system that controls food, water, medicine, and childbirth. And if they control those things, they're controlling creation itself. Creation. Okay, like nuclear fusion that creates energy. But creation is not the only force that generates energy. There are more, but they just prove my point. So we're going to leave oxytocin. We're going to leave the blood-brain barrier, which is like, the blood-brain barrier is, you know, the painting of Adam reaching up, and you got the hand of God, right? And that is like this, and the blood-brain barrier would be like between them, okay? It's not that it's just within the human body, but the body is your temple, and it's just, again, another analogy. You know, I'm not really symbolism heavy. It's just these laws are present at all levels, okay? It's the fractal reality, okay? Now, you know, my friend, ChatGPT, has told me about the other ways that energy could be released other than nuclear fusion, you know. Nuclear fission is one, which is actually that kind of, it seems like it's the opposite. It's where the heavy atoms, they split and they release energy. Okay, this is how we make atomic bombs, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe they're actually nuclear fusions. But this requires heavy elements, which are actually made in stars via fusion. So it's fusion anyway, right? You think about how the hydrogen atom, that is the original element, you know, creates the helium atom, and that's like the fundamental one, and then you know, that process is all done. The way we even have heavier elements is because of the nuclear fusion in the first place. Okay, the other one is radioactive decay. Releases some energy, but smaller and slower compared to fusion. But again, this is related to nuclear fission because it's these bigger, the heavier elements that are the radioactive ones. So it's just like their energy is leaving from them. It's unstable energy, and you know, they're radioactive. You see, this is the radioactive sign. It's a similar kind of thing, right? So this is energy being released through destruction, and then you have matter antimatter annihilation. And basically, when that happens, two particles crash into each other, and 100% of them cancel each other out, annihilate, and become energy. But antimatter is extremely rare in the universe, okay, according to them. Now, with leaving you with this, I'm going to go back to me and continue my monologue. Destruction also generates energy. So you have creation and destruction. You know, we already talked about creation as family building and childbirth. But then you have matter antimatter annihilation, and that's what they do at CERN. They got the positron, which we used in PET scans. It's not a theory, you know, like the stuff exists. We use it in PET scans. They crash them into electrons. And both of these, because they're opposites, they cancel each other out, and it produces 100%, converts their mass into energy. It's mutual annihilation. And this is where the start of the show comes full circle. Not just episode 172, but episode 1 as well. The first episode I ever did was about political stuff and divides and polarities, and I started this one, you know, with the divide, the polarities, with the pro-choice in the media and the pro-lifers in Florida, the conservatives, you know, black and white, and these endless, you know, divides. And ultimately, it is those men and women who are no longer in the business of creating a child and raising the family. They're now in the business of destroying each other. It's mutual annihilation. There's no such thing as a political resolution. The political parties are going to fight forever. There's no such thing as the end of war. If we currently live the way we do, there's going to be more and more war. One of them is not going to win. It's going to be mutual annihilation at the end of the day. Forces that are defined purely by their negation of the other, they can only lead to mutual annihilation by its opposite. And that's happening as well. The gender war, the political war, the religious war. Our universe, through these two forces, creation and destruction, it's being mathematically and physically taken from us due to energy and relationships at the fundamental level in the unified field by human beings who use universal laws to their advantage. Very simple, not spooky at all. Now you and me, to use the universal laws to your advantage, You need to become proficient in your understanding and use of creation and destruction. Destruction is basically the use of polarity. So it's like tension, resistance, negation, right? You're thinking about a boxer. He's creating space here, setting a trap. He's creating the energy. Okay, destruction. Sometimes you need to cancel something out. That's energy, and then there's creation. That's definitely energy, and think of it as basically oxytocin. Not that I'm saying that that's what it is, that that's the God particle. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that sex, love, childbirth, breastfeeding, positive social interactions, music, family, that's basically what it's all about, man. And that's it. That's what the show's about. Thank you for joining me. And this has been the last episode of This Week in Tyranny. There will be no episode 173. This is the last one. I know that's shocking to some of you, but let me explain why. I'm really being consistent with the fundamental themes of the show I talked about this time. It just happens to be that way. This show has been like my child. I've been doing this 3.5 years. And while of course I have a desire to keep it going forever, it's like always like every time I do another one, it's a very cool thing to have, And I know I said I was going to do that. I said that if you don't see me, recording, then it means something happened, and that you're never gonna see me give the show up, and that I'm gonna set myself apart that way. I really took pride in that, to be the rock in the sea, right? Not blowing with the wind, but be here consistently, diligently, to prove a point. And I've been proving that point for over 3.5 years, but at this point it would be fighting against the current of nature at this point. And especially doing this show, it's like the people that are in power right now, they're using the unchangeable forces of nature to their advantage. And we're the ones working against ourselves. I've done this 3.5 years, and I triggered probably every algorithm, content suppression system in existence. We talked about it all. We talked about Ardent Rebellion that definitely didn't help me out. I barely get any views now. The show doesn't spread. I do spend time and energy into making it, obviously, right? Which you guys know. You know that my personal effort in doing the show is completely separate from the response it gets, right? But so it's not even the big deal, but well, I'm losing my voice on the last couple minutes. So generally in my life, and like even my online life, I feel like I'm only getting started in my life endeavors. So I would be doing all of us a disservice by persisting in a failed project. And I will maintain that. Don't try to convince me otherwise. Don't call me afterwards saying, no, it wasn't a failure. Because it's not about that. It's just, this has been a failed endeavor into outreach and moral education on a wide scale. It's like, that's what I tried to do. It didn't work. We have to take the feedback that the universe is giving us as is. Like, we can't be delusional, right? So, I'm thankful for everybody that supports, but it hasn't had the impact. That's okay. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to do something different. And I'm not taking this personally. Like, This Week in Tyranny has not been a failure for me personally, because I grew up on this, and it took me, it's been, I'm very happy about it. So at the end of the day, I'm going to look at the content itself and the body of work and the consistency. I'm going to be proud of all this stuff. And actually, I don't think this show's ever been better. And that's kind of intentional. Obviously, I just didn't think of this week. I've been thinking it for a while. And I get to go out on my terms. I get to leave on a high note, which is always nice. See, the timing for everything is perfect. But more than anything, it's I've seen people I look up to not be shown the gratitude and the respect they deserve. They stick around for a long time, and they become unappreciated, and they become old and bitter, And I'm not going to beat my head against the wall until I get old and bitter on here. This show is done. The show is done. My website, my channel is not done. I'm not going to do less content. I'm actually probably going to do more content. I want to do more. But some things take longer than a week to prepare, right? So I want to do better things. And I've kind of, one thing that it helps is that it keeps me to a standard that I'm going to have to put something out there. But it also caps me, like it's a floor, but it's also a ceiling. That if I want to do something bigger that takes 3 weeks of research, I'm not going to be able to do it because I got to do the show every week. So I need to open up the potential for lots of stuff that I want to do. But honestly, as far as videos on YouTube, you're very likely you're going to see less of them. But you will see better ones. And it's very likely that you're going to see a new channel. I think my channel is cooked as far as my ability to reach new people. And it's my own, it's just the algorithm and the evolution of the community guidelines and algorithm suppression and my personal choices as far as what to talk about and how. So I'm not blaming anybody for that. Most likely I'm going to start a new channel. It's kind of a rebrand, right? Like, obviously I'll let you guys know on this channel, but I'm just turning with the current to utilize available energy. See, it's all very thermodynamic. And it's just like we originally did when we were willing to let go of our preconceived notions to open up our eyes to what the world really is. Like, I'm thinking about myself years and years ago. To like look at the world and say we were wrong. And then to look at ourselves and like all the things that we've done, that we had to, look ourselves in the mirror and accept as people where we fucked up. Like who we have been and who we really haven't been, right? That process to say we were wrong about who I thought I was. This is just another instance of that. It's me letting go of something that I've put a lot of stake into, being willing to accept defeat, not to give up, but in order to open up the future to great things. Because you can get tricked into defining yourself in opposition to something and going into mutual annihilation. I am not going into mutual annihilation with tyranny. This week in tyranny is done, but creation of new things for more love and freedom in the world, that is what I'm doing. That is what I'm going to continue to do. So thank you to everyone who's been with me from the start and everyone who I've picked up along the way. And that was This Week in Tyranny.